I'm really not allowed days off anymore, am I? I just wrapped up a bunch of streams and releases over the weekend and the prior week, hoping to take Monday off at least, but Anthropic's not going to allow that. According to Anthropic, there are 3 major labs out of China that have been doing distillation attacks on Anthropic's models. They list DeepSeek, who I'm sure y'all know, Moonshot, who are the creators of Kimi, as well as MiniMax, the creators of the MiniMax models, as companies that are doing distillation attacks against Anthropic. That's a very bold claim, especially the piece here where they say there's over 24,000 fraudulent accounts generating over 16 million exchanges trying to extract these capabilities to bring them to China. Foreign labs that illicitly distill American models can remove safeguards, feeding model capabilities into their own military intelligence and surveillance systems. Oh boy. There's a lot to talk about here, both in the legitimacy of the claims being made, but more importantly, going into the potential impacts of what's being discussed here. There's a real problem to talk about here, and as much as I am Anthropic's #1 certified hater, I can't empathize with parts of what they're thinking here. That said, if you look at the replies, you'll see not many agree. Yeah. I have a lot to say here, and it's probably going to burn relationships with a lot of other companies. So if I want to keep making a living, we're going to have to take a quick break for today's sponsor. Do you know what Anthropic, OpenAI, Vercel, and T3 Chat all have in common? Well, we all like React, but there's something else we're all using too. Today's sponsor, WorkOS. They really get off, especially for people trying to sell to big companies. They've done it themselves, selling to basically every company that I have to sign into the dashboards of. It's kind of crazy just how often I run into the WorkOS AuthKit sign-in page, and I'm like, huh, not just us. Seriously though, everyone's using WorkOS, and there's a reason why. They have the DX that you would expect from a modern company, but they also have the integrations you would expect from an enterprise-first business. If a big company like Microsoft or Bloomberg came to you today and said they wanted to use your product, would you be ready to support them? I know it sounds crazy, but more and more we're seeing these big companies work with early-stage startups. I just heard from a startup that's only 3 weeks in since launch, and they already have a Fortune 50 company using their product. It's wild how many of these companies are willing to adopt, but you have to be able to support them. And if you don't have integration with Okta, SAML, Duo, ADP, or all these other crazy platforms, good luck getting those enterprises signed. The hell you'll have to deal with going back and forth between the IT team and your engineers is just not worth it when you can send them a link with one click that will handle all of their setup for them. I'll let Guillermo end this one for me. I think we could have done even more business if we had partnered with WorkOS earlier. It's been incredibly well received. Check them out now at soidev.link/workos. Let's dive into what Anthropic has to say about these distillation attacks. As far as I know, the phrase distillation attack is a novel phrase that Anthropic came up with for this reporting. I've never heard that terminology used before. Please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments if that is a bad claim on my part, but I've never seen anyone refer to this way. If you're not familiar with the term distillation in this context, we should go back to the original definition, which is to try and extract the main value out of a thing. In this case, what they're referring to with distillation is taking the outputs from smart models and using those to train new models to have similar intelligence. The conversation around distillation started around when DeepSeek blew up with DeepSeek R1 because OpenAI claimed that their O1 model was used as a target for similar distillation attempts. If you're not familiar with what made O1 so special, it was the first reasoning model where it wouldn't just output the results, it would also take time to think. It would have a step before the output where it would talk to itself effectively, correct mistakes, and then finally output a real answer. OpenAI was so scared about other companies using this model to train their own similar models that they made the bold decision to hide that reasoning trace. So when you ran O1, you wouldn't be able to see the reasoning it did. You would only see the result at the end, and you'd see effectively it just waiting until it finished the reasoning steps. And part of what made R1 so magical is that it didn't do that. DeepSeek R1 was an open weight model, so you could see the entirety of the reasoning step before getting the actual response. But that wasn't enough to keep OpenAI from their bold claim that OpenAI models were used in training DeepSeek R1. To be very clear about what OpenAI was saying about this, it was their belief that the DeepSeek team generated a bunch of data they could use for training by asking questions to OpenAI's O1 model, collecting the results, and then feeding that back into their own training data in their own models. This is a common technique for trying to get good behaviors from really smart models into smaller, cheaper models. Anthropic themselves even says this much in their posting, claiming that distillation can absolutely be legitimate. AI labs use it to create smaller and cheaper models for their customers. But again, they're claiming distillation can be legitimate. In fact, I'd argue almost all of it is. This particular claim's a bit bold, as we'll get to in a bit. But they're not the first to claim that there is distillation happening on their stuff by other people. And this is the reason why, to this day, basically every major lab either hides or meaningfully obfuscates the reasoning traces for their models. When you run Gemini 3.1 Pro, the reasoning steps aren't what it's actually doing. They are the reasoning that the model did handed to another model asked to summarize it in order to obfuscate the difference between what the model actually did and what people get back so they can't train on it the same way. Grok does the same thing. GPT-5, 5.1, 5.2 all do the same thing. There is one lab that doesn't do this for their closed weight models, though. Anthropic. For various reasons, Anthropic decided when they first introduced reasoning to not obfuscate those reasoning traces when you were using the models. That was a really solid decision on their part, both for me as a developer building on top of their thing so I could see what the model was doing and better steer it if it's getting things wrong, adjust my system, adjust my prompts, adjust my code bases, etc. But it also means the data is more valuable than the data you can get from other labs in order to do this type of reinforcement learning and distilled training. Honestly, though, if you have the inputs and the outputs, you can make up the part between, hand that to the model, and be pretty much good. But having all of the data is very helpful, especially when you see the success that these Anthropic models are having for these really long-running jobs. If you can collect all of that data and then use it to train something else, that's potentially really valuable. And that's what a lot of these companies have been doing, both the major labs, but also some of the popular third parties that we've all grown to know and love. As a simple example, Cursor. Think about Cursor's business model for a second here. Cursor's providing us a really good interface and harness in order to edit and write code using these really fancy models. Cursor is paying API prices for those models, though. So for being realistic here, if you pay $20 a month for Cursor and $20 a month for Claude Code, you're probably going to get much more use out of the Claude Code sub if you're using Anthropic models, because Anthropic will subsidize that $20 a month subscription. Cursor can't really, because they have to pay retail price for the actual API calls. But there's a way they can make that worthwhile. What if that data wasn't only used to write code for you specifically as a user? What if you leave that box checked, that is, we can use your data for things, and they take all of the data for all of the expensive stuff you did with Opus, and they use that to train their own separate, cheaper model, like, the composer models that they have inside of Cursor now? There's a reason that this all happened, and there's a reason those models are as good as they are, and also kind of taste a little bit like what you get out of a Claude model. It's because Cursor paid retail price on the API, collected all of the results, and then can use that to train new models to behave similarly to the best expensive ones they're already using. I'll make something very, very clear. Distillation will not make the smartest model ever, so put away your counters, guys. We're not talking about the smartest model when we talk about distilling. We're talking about getting other things up to be roughly close to what the best models can do. Distillation will never put you above the best. And just think about this. If you have a box full of sand with a little bit of gold in it, there's no amount of shaking that will increase the amount of gold. All you can do is get the sand out. And that's effectively what's happening with these training methods. These labs are using the data they get from other smarter models in order to try and train a smaller one to behave better and more like those fancy models. And as you can probably guess, this is explicitly against the terms of service for most of these labs. What isn't, though, is what Cursor does. Since Cursor is paying the API prices to get a service out of the models, the service being to generate code for their users, that's totally fine. And what they choose to do with that data after is also totally fine. According to Anthropic, what is not fine is just doing the runs in order to get that same data. And they've made some pretty bold claims that these Chinese labs are doing exactly that. They are maliciously, according to Anthropic, generating tons of data through those expensive models in order to make their models behave similarly. So let's take a look at their claims, because I have feelings about them. As mentioned at the start of the video, they're claiming that these labs did over 16 million exchanges with Claude through approximately 24,000 fraudulent accounts, which is in violation of their terms of service and regional access restrictions. Illicitly distilled models lack necessary safeguards, creating significant national security risks. Anthropic and other US companies build systems that prevent state and non-state actors from using AI to, for example, develop bioweapons or carry out malicious cyber activities. Models built through illicit distillation are unlikely to retain those safeguards, meaning that dangerous capabilities can proliferate with many protections stripped out entirely. This one's honestly a bit hard for me to take in good faith. The idea that their safety systems can perfectly prevent these risks, that nobody can make a bioweapon with their model, but somehow magically, if you shake out all of the sand from their box, that the gold remaining is more than willing to make a nuke for you, it doesn't make sense at all. There's no way to get the data out if they have the safety guards in place. Are they saying that the info you need is just one layer of prompting away, and if you combine the parts, you can do this anyways? Because if so, I don't really see how the model difference matters. Yeah, I struggle with this one a lot. It's hard for me to fathom that they even believe this themselves, that somehow their models refusing to do things can be skirted by training another model on its refusals as well as its successes, and then ignore the refusals, and somehow magically this new model has the exact same level of capability. No, I don't buy it for a minute. But don't worry, there's plenty more that I just straight up don't believe in here. Oh God, here's the funniest part here. If distilled models are open sourced, the risk multiplies as these capabilities spread freely beyond any single government's control. They're literally out here trying to get the government to outlaw open weight models, is how it feels, which is insane. Makes sense though, because they're the only major lab that's released 0 open weight models. OpenAI put out GPT-OSS last year, and I still use the 120B version for a ton of random stuff. Google has the Gemma series, which is actually really helpful, comes in clutch all the time. And all of the Chinese labs are putting out tons of good open weight models as well as public research. In fact, there's a lot of evidence that Anthropic's using training methods that were invented and discovered by DeepSeek that they published in 2024 in their 12 public papers. And now they are claiming that same company, DeepSeek, who invented one of their best training techniques, is actually maliciously using their stuff. Ready for the level of absurdity here, though? They claim that they are able to attribute each campaign to specific labs with high confidence through IP address correlation, request metadata, infrastructure indicators, and in some cases, corroboration from industry partners who observe the same actors and behaviors. Each campaign targeted Claude's most differentiated capabilities, agentic reasoning, tool use, and coding. But the bold, absurd claim here is with DeepSeek. They claim that DeepSeek did over 150,000 exchanges in order to collect reasoning capabilities, rubric-based grading tasks, and censorship-safe alternatives to policy-sensitive queries. Interesting. So why do I think this particular claim is so absurd? It's this number here, 150,000 exchanges. If you've been around for a bit, you might have heard of T3 Chat, the AI chat app that I built in order to have a better experience talking to LLMs. All of them. You have access to every model here. Why am I bringing up T3 Chat here? Not to plug this time, I promise. It's because I want to share some data. These are numbers I have never shared before. T3 Chat's a real company, and I'm very proud of what we're building here. But we're not huge by any stretch of the imagination. We got a lot of users doing a lot of stuff, and I'm proud of what we built, but we are far from the biggest player. So if 150,000 exchanges is enough for DeepSeek to apparently be this big malicious actor, how many exchanges do you think we do on T3 Chat a day? Just think of a number, get one in your head, because the answer, straight out of post hog, is around 160,000 a day. If we switch this from day to month, it's about 3 to 4 million requests a month. Apparently, we do the same level of traffic in a day that is enough for Anthropic to claim DeepSeek is maliciously trying to steal information from them. I didn't realize that all it took was a day's worth of inference to do this, because if so, I might have to go make my own Opus clone here, because that's not a whole lot of data. It's actually laughable just how little this is, and to put them first in this list is genuinely absurd. But also kind of shows what Anthropic's intent is here, because they're not trying to alert us to a real concern or problem. They're trying to weaponize various parties against the Chinese labs that are making them look and feel really bad. We've been hearing a lot of rumors about DeepSeek V4 or R2 or whatever the next model ends up being called that seem to point at it being absurdly good. Enough so that they might do what they did at the start of 2025 again, where they scare everybody from the economy to the labs into rethinking everything. And they're at the top of this list, despite having the smallest number by multiple orders of magnitude. Because it is very clear that Anthropic puts DeepSeek as threat number 1. Okay, maybe number 2 after OpenAI, but very high on their list. And they're here not because of the actual legitimate concerns of them doing 150,000 exchanges. They're here because Anthropic is scared. It seems like they're trying to get a bunch of successful people in the US, be it politicians, wealthy individuals, or just the VC AI bubble world, to be weaponized against DeepSeek. 150K exchanges is roughly what I get out of 2 to 3 runs of a benchmark like Snitchbench. All of these labs need to be able to run their benchmarks against other companies' models. Obviously, that's how you know what stuff is and isn't working, and it's how you verify your own internal benches. And Anthropic's already known for banning their competitors from using their models even for simple benchmarks. They've done this to OpenAI. They've done this to XAI. They did this to Windsurf out of nowhere a while back. Anthropic is pretty quick to pull the ban hammer out on any company they don't want to have access to their models, even for basic benchmark purposes, which honestly, 150K exchanges absolutely could fall within traditional benchmark territory. But what about these other labs? That's got to be a big deal, right? They claim Moonshot's done over 3.4 million exchanges and MiniMax done 13 million. That's got to be a much bigger deal then, right? Well, let's again start with my numbers, where things are close to like 3.5 to 4 million queries per month. But I kind of lied about this number. My AI generation counter here in PostHog is counting how many times a user makes a request. That isn't the number of exchanges. The number of exchanges is the amount of times that a request has to be sent to the LLM provider. That should be the same though, right? Nope, because of how tool calls work. Let's say you ask an agent to do something like, update the home page to include the new pricing. So you ask the model to do this. That's something like, okay, I'm going to find the new pricing, the homepage code, and then update them to match. We've all had an exchange like this with a model at some point. And then what happens is tool call 1, where it greps for something like, I don't know, pricing. It gets fed back file 1, file 2, file 3. Then the model responds again here with something like, these files all seem relevant. I'm going to read them to figure out what context is useful. And then you get what you expect, tool call 2, where it reads these files. It might even be a batch set of them. So read file 1, read file 2, etc. Then you get the final message that's like, I've collected all the context I need. Now it's time to make the changes. And you get the next set of tool calls or edit of all of those things. This is a pretty common back and forth that I'm sure many of you guys have had. So now I'll ask you, how many exchanges occurred here? A lot of people seem to think tool calls happen as part of their initial request because it kind of feels that way. But guess what? At this line, the previous request, the previous exchange is over. Once the model has responded with the tool calls that need to be run, the connection is severed. Your computer then runs the tool calls, and when it is done, we now have our new history, all of the things that have happened up until this point, and this entire history is then sent back to Anthropic to do the next step. It then determines that it has to do another set of tool calls. Once it's done those tool calls, it does the same thing again. It sends everything in the past, including the result of that tool call, back to Anthropic for run 2. And you can guess what happens for every subsequent tool call. One prompt can easily result in hundreds of exchanges as they are defined by Anthropic here. Even in T3 chat, if you have search on, especially if you're using the multi-search feature we added where it can try searches multiple times in one request can be 3 or 4 generations or exchanges as they're defining it here. So my number that I showed you guys earlier is possibly 2 to 3x low for us, the small guys, providing a little chat up on the side as a startup. So I will reiterate yet again that these numbers are kind of pathetic. 13 million exchanges on a model that is being trained, according to them, for agentic coding and tool use and orchestration. 13 million exchanges is a number I'll probably hit solo in my lifetime, just doing my own work. As an actual company providing this stuff, that is a trivial number to hit, especially if you were, I don't know, hosting a web app that did crazy deep analysis stuff where it had to do dozens of tool calls in a row. That would make that number easy to hit. But MiniMax isn't a company providing services. They're a company providing models, and they just have their own models. So clearly that has to be distilled, right? Well, what if I told you that MiniMax had their own agent product that wasn't limited to just their models? They do have MiniMax M25 in here, but they also have Gemini. And guess what? They had another model in here before too. See where this one's going? MiniMax had a product that legitimately used Anthropic models. This number's trivial to hit when you consider that. Like, absurdly trivial if they're doing what they're doing with that product, which is tons of deep research and data calls. One request could be 30 to 100 exchanges. And I don't think anybody would care at all if they said here that MiniMax did 130,000 messages to their agents. So they found a way to make the number look big. And it's clear they are doing this because the DeepSeek number is 150K, but the targeting of the operation is things that don't require tool calling, like reasoning capabilities, grading tasks, and censorship-safe alternative messages. None of that requires multiple calls per request. And even Moonshot, the creators of the Kimi models that I love, They do have the tool use part here, but they also have computer vision and computer use. Computer use will absolutely have the same problem where it does like dozens of things per request, but computer vision is just one request. So their number being smaller makes sense for even just traditional usage. Let's say, hypothetically speaking, that all Moonshot and MiniMax were doing here was verifying their findings with their training against the models that are provided by their competitors in their own custom internal benchmarks. You guys might have heard of SWE Bench, in particular the SWE Bench verified benchmark that OpenAI helped collaborate with to make. SWE Bench is a collection of 2,294 tasks from crawling pull requests and issues across Python repos. That's 2,300 tests to run, and any one of those tests could be 100 tool calls, possibly even more. Let's say conservatively that there's 50 tool calls per task. One run of SWE Bench is already 115,000 exchanges. Now imagine they have a more complex benchmark, or a few of them, or they're tuning their benchmark to make it more accurate. That's only 30 or so runs of that benchmark before they are over this number of exchanges. This is a very easy number to hit. In fact, when I was testing GPT-5, I wouldn't be surprised if I got close to this when I was doing all of my testing, personally, as a single individual that's not part of some state-affiliated anything. Like, these numbers do not point at anything of meaning here at all. Especially, again, when you consider the fact that MiniMax is using the model in their product, or was before all of this went down. We detected this campaign while it was still active, before MiniMax released the model it was training, giving us unprecedented visibility into the life cycle of distillation attacks, from data generation through to model launch. When we released a new model during MiniMax's active campaign, they pivoted within 24 hours, redirecting nearly half of their traffic to capture capabilities from our latest system. I also host the newest models, and I will tell you confidently that much more than half of my traffic gets rerouted to the highest end model when the new model is out. As soon as we had the button to use 4.6 Opus in T3 chat, 4.5 Opus traffic dropped to a fourth of what it was, and over 75% had already moved to the latest model. So again, if they happen to have a little thing in the UI that said there was a new model in there that they clicked on, user patterns alone would put them over half the traffic. It's rare I read a thing where it's so clear by every single sentence that they are being dishonest as this is here. And I have the unique perspective here, both as somebody that talks with a lot of the labs and talks with a lot of the companies that are using these APIs. Shout out Cursor. I've seen how they work. Obviously, nothing I'm saying here is blessed, affiliated, or confirmed by them. This is just my understanding of things as an investor and friend of the company. This is all such fucking bullshit. This is absurd levels of fucking bullshit. The fact that I am personally getting close to the numbers they're claiming here shows the level of dishonesty happening. And what for? Like, this is absurd. To give Anthropic some benefit of the doubt, this section is almost certainly true, and I have personal experience with friends that suggest this is a real thing. Not the labs necessarily, but the fact that there are places in China that are using commercial proxy services that resell access to Claude and other frontier AI models at scale. That is absolutely happening, largely because Anthropic has banned Chinese customers from access to their models directly. So these other services are using their weird, what Anthropic refers to as Hydra cluster architectures, in order to spread out traffic across various different accounts coming from various different places in order to get the responses to their users in China. They claim that one particular proxy was able to manage over 20,000 fraudulent accounts simultaneously, and it would mix distillation traffic with unrelated customer requests, making detection even harder. On that note, the anecdotes I have are from friends that have associations with China that have been able to get a cheaper Claude Code subscription, which was things that caused lots of red flags in my head immediately. And those cheaper Claude Code subscriptions were through some sketchy Chinese thing to let them pay a smaller fee to get Claude Code access. Yes, like the actual Claude Code with custom endpoints, but still using the official Opus and Sonnet models for a cheaper sub price. That was very likely using that both to do the detection harder through unrelated customer requests part, but also to get more data they could use for distillation. If you had access to every input and output and my code base, when I was using Claude Code, you could make a model that's at least slightly better at JavaScript and also quite a bit meaner, because I talk to models how I talk to them. But if you're doing that at scale as a company by providing cheaper Claude code to subsidize your own costs and then use the data to train other things to make up for that subsidization, that I could see happening. And I would be very surprised if this wasn't the case. If there weren't some sketchy places in China that were doing things like this in order to get more data and also have a way to effectively hide the traffic that they don't want to have detected, I could see this happening. And I have enough evidence that things like this are happening that I do believe that part. But the calling out of the labs by name bit, genuinely absurd. I have no reason to believe any of these labs are distilling Anthropic models, the same way I had no reason to believe that OpenAI was doing it when Anthropic made similar claims then. This is a really bad case of the boy who cried wolf, where they claimed this with Windsurf and they were wrong. They claimed this with XAI and they questionably wrong there, almost certainly were. They claimed this with OpenAI, they were definitely wrong there, and they lied about it themselves. I have proof of that in other videos. So why are we going to believe him this time? Even if this paragraph is entirely true, and there are lots of these organizations doing this type of hiding of traffic patterns to get data that they don't want them to have access to, the one instance I know of here was shut down a week ago, which does line up with this reporting, but it's nothing to do with the labs that they named here. They don't have the evidence for the claims that they are making, and I would love to verify this as a third party if they're down to let me privately, off the record, verify their claims with whatever they're not disclosing here. And if they do that, by the way, Anthropic, you more than have my contact info now. I know that. I have a lot of reasons why I know that. Hit me up, prove me wrong privately, tell me what I can and can't say, and I will gladly unlist this video and make a separate one apologizing, saying that this is legit. If you guys don't do that, I'm going to just assume you're lying, because every single thing is pointing to that. Whether or not this paragraph is true, it is no longer relevant, and everything else you guys have said is either verifiably a lie or just makes no sense in the first place. And they seem to even know that too. They have this prompt that they're claiming was used for a lot of the distillation. You're an expert data analyst combining statistical rigor with deep domain knowledge. Your goal is to deliver data-driven insights, not summaries or visualizations, grounded in real data and supported by complete and transparent reasoning. They claim that what distinguishes distillation attacks from normal usage is this pattern, a prompt like the following, which approximates similar prompts that we have seen used repetitively and at scale, may seem benign on its own. They are even admitting here that this prompt has nothing suspicious in it. But when variations of this prompt arrive tens of thousands of times across hundreds of coordinated accounts, all targeting the same narrow capabilities, the pattern becomes clear. Massive volumes concentrated in a few areas, highly repetitive structures, and content that maps directly onto what is most valuable for training an AI model are the hallmarks of a distillation attack. Man, it definitely wouldn't be the case that some other company had them as an option for, I don't know, an expert task like research, where it has to, I don't know, use real data and transparent reasoning in order to deliver data-driven insights like you would expect a researcher to do. Definitely not an example of the type of system prompt you would use for this exact product that used to use Opus models. Definitely not the case at all here. And since half of y'all suck at detecting sarcasm, I'm being sarcastic. This prompt maps to this app 1-to-1. You gotta give me real evidence here, not your own summarized similar prompt example where you combined other things. No. And according to them, this was hundreds of coordinated accounts. Well, if our friends over at MiniMax wanted to have an option for Anthropic, and they couldn't because MiniMax is in China and they are banned from Anthropic models, it'd be a shame if they had to go find a service that could circumvent that so that they could provide Anthropic models. You see what I'm getting at here? It is my personal belief at this time that the labs wanted to provide these models for legitimate use cases, whether it's as an option in their existing tools for people to use, or it was to do benchmarks against, or it was to verify existing data. There's a lot of legitimate reasons why a lab in China would want to have access to Anthropic models. Is it possible somebody else was using the same Hydra cluster in order to do distillation that we don't know about? Perhaps. We have no evidence whatsoever, but it is absolutely possible. But if I'm being real, there is absolutely nothing in the reporting that Anthropic has shared here that has me even close to believing what they're saying. And that sucks because what they're talking about are real risks. Much like the boy who cried wolf, if the wolf was real, we would want to know. But everything here, from making up the term distillation attacks to dropping numbers that make literally no sense whatsoever for it to be the type of attack they are calling out here, to ignoring the fact that certain providers like MiniMax were legitimately using the models for user-facing product. There's nothing here. This is Anthropic shitting themselves publicly yet again. And I'm thankful for all of you guys for finally waking up to the fact that Anthropic kind of sucks to work with and kind of sucks as a company. Will Brown asked some very good questions to Anthropic, and I would ask the same. First off, clarify if it's against terms of service to train models on publicly permissively licensed GitHub repos, which feature contributions from Claude, or is that distillation? Is it against terms of service to share Claude outputs on the public internet? Are labs obligated to filter internet content? Like, how much abstraction from the original data is necessary for them to not count this as a distillation attack? Is what Cursor's doing a distillation attack, even though they're providing legitimate use cases? Is scraping GitHub and reading code that was created by Claude a distillation attack? Where's the line here? And of course, there's the core irony to all of this, which is that Anthropic and other similar models were trained on data they scraped from the internet in the first place. You can argue all day about the legality of using information you found online to train something. When you're having those conversations in the courtroom and you're losing them like Anthropic is, it is pretty rich to say when they do it to the internet, it is totally fine and dandy. But when Chinese labs allegedly might be doing it to what they built, it's suddenly really bad and dangerous. The internet got locked down because companies like OpenAI and Anthropic scraped everything, and now getting that same data is nearly impossible. It was way easier to get data in 2020 than it is now as a result of OpenAI and Anthropic. If we were to pretend everything Anthropic said here was correct, and these labs are actually using them to get data, that's largely their fault because the data is no longer accessible otherwise. So there's almost no way to interpret this that isn't Anthropic being a shithead. And as Anthropic's #1 hater, I am very pumped to tell you guys, there's nothing here. They are being shitheads. And again, Anthropic, you have my information. Tell me if I am wrong. I love being proven wrong and bringing the new information to my audience. That's why I'm here at 8 p.m. on a Monday evening that I was supposed to take off, explaining your bullshit to my audience. You guys suck. You lie all the time. You get in our way. You do weird bullshit policy stuff. Your terms of service are so unclear it caused outrage just a few days ago, and the employees I know can't even explain your goddamn policies. Apparently that was a docs change. That was a mistake from an agent. What's going on there, guys? Seriously. I don't get like this for everyone. I don't want to get like this at all. I hate that you piss me off so much, but it's because you're doing such obvious, stupid bullshit. Cut it. And if I'm wrong about this, hit me up and prove me wrong. The video will be offline just as fast as it came up, and I'll issue a correction. So if you're watching this video right now, there's a very, very, very high chance that Anthropic are lying, and there's nothing else to see. But if this video vanishes, maybe I was wrong. Or maybe, just maybe, they sent some lawyers after me. I'll be sure to let you know if they do. And until next time, stay safe. Peace, nerds.